The conservatory smelled like salt wind and old wood when Gwendolyn Hart pressed the first key, and the ancient grand piano exhaled a note so pure it made the shadows along the walls tremble. She had been working nights at the cliffside estate for 3 months, tuning instruments that no one played, wandering halls where chandeliers gathered dust and marble floors echoed with only her footsteps. The owner was absent, they said, traveling. The estate manager paid her well to maintain the collection, asked no questions about why she preferred to work when the sun was down, when the rest of the world slept and she could pretend that grief was something that only existed in daylight. Tonight, the wind rattled the conservatory windows, glass panes that stretched floor to ceiling, overlooking an ocean that crashed against rocks 200 feet below. Gwendolyn had saved this room for last, partially because the piano here was the oldest, a Venetian piece from sometime in the 1700s, and partially because the room itself felt like a held breath, like something was waiting. She was tightening the pins on the higher octaves when she heard footsteps behind her. "I did not think anyone would be here," a voice said, low and careful, with an accent she couldn't place. Old Europe, perhaps. Older. Gwendolyn turned and forgot how to breathe. The man standing in the doorway was impossibly pale, skin like moonlight on snow, and his hair fell past his shoulders in waves of silver white that caught the dim light like spun glass. He wore a black shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms marked with faint scars that looked ceremonial, deliberate. His eyes were the color of winter storms, gray and endless, and they fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel like the only living thing in the world. He looked like he belonged in a painting. He looked like he was dying. "I'm the piano tuner," Gwendolyn said, finding her voice. "Gwendolyn Hart. I work nights. I'm sorry if I disturbed you." "You did not." He moved into the room with a grace that was too smooth, too fluid, and she understood then what he was. She had heard stories, everyone had, about the old bloodlines that still walked the earth, the ones who kept to themselves in estates like this one, who signed checks through lawyers and never appeared in photographs. "I am Hadrian Valtoris. This is my home." Vampire. The word hung unspoken between them. "I thought you were traveling," she said. "I was." Hadrian stopped a careful distance away, as though he knew his presence might unsettle her. "I returned tonight. I heard the music and thought I was dreaming." Gwendolyn glanced at the piano. "It hasn't been played in a long time. The strings are old, but still good. Another few hours and it'll be concert ready." She hesitated. "Do you play?" "I did. Once." Something passed across his face, a shadow of old pain. "It has been silent for decades. I could not bear to hear it." "Why?" The question came out before she could stop it. Hadrian looked at her for a long moment, and she saw exhaustion in his eyes, the kind that came from living too long, seeing too much. "Because the last person who played it is gone, and I am still here." The words hit her like a wave. Gwendolyn understood that feeling, the guilt of continuing when someone else had stopped. Her sister had been gone for 2 years, a car accident on a rainy night, and every morning since had felt like a betrayal, like she was stealing time that should have belonged to someone better. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. Hadrian tilted his head slightly. "You understand?" "Yes." The silence between them shifted, became something softer. The wind howled outside, and the ocean roared, and inside the conservatory it felt like they were the only 2 people left in the world. "Play something," Hadrian said suddenly. "Please. I want to know if I can still bear it." Gwendolyn moved to the piano bench and sat down, her fingers finding the keys like coming home. She had not played for herself in months, only tuned for others, but something about this moment, this man, made her want to try. She began a nocturne, something slow and aching, Chopin, a piece her sister had loved. The notes spilled into the darkness, and she lost herself in them, eyes closed, letting the music carry her grief and hope and all the tangled feelings she kept locked inside during the day. When she finished, her hands were shaking. She opened her eyes and found Hadrian standing closer, just a few feet away, his expression raw and open in a way that made him look devastatingly human. "Again," he said, his voice rough. "Please." Gwendolyn played again, A different piece this time, something brighter, and then another and another, until her fingers ached, and the sky outside had shifted from black to the deep blue of pre-dawn. Hadrian listened to every note, never moving, never speaking, and when she finally stopped, he looked at her like she had given him something he thought he had lost forever. "Thank you," he said. "One dance won't hurt," Gwendolyn said impulsively, not sure where the words came from. She stood from the bench, her heart pounding. "If you want. To see if you remember how it feels." Hadrian stared at her, surprise flickering across his face. "There is no music." "I'll hum." She held out her hand, terrified he would refuse, terrified he would accept. He looked at her hand like it was something precious and dangerous. Then, slowly, he took it. His skin was cool, not cold, and his touch was gentle as he drew her close, one hand settling at her waist, the other cradling her fingers. Gwendolyn began to hum the nocturne she had played first, and they moved together in the dim light of the conservatory, swaying gently, not quite a waltz, more like two people remembering what it felt like to not be alone. Hadrian held her like she might disappear, like she was made of glass and starlight. His eyes never left her face, and she saw something in them that made her chest ache, a longing so deep it had no bottom. "Why do you work at night?" he asked quietly as they turned. "Because I don't want to see people during the day," Gwendolyn admitted. "Because they're all moving forward and I'm still stuck." "What are you stuck in?" "Grief. My sister died 2 years ago, and I haven't figured out how to keep living without her." The words came easier than she expected. "Every morning feels wrong." Hadrian's hand tightened at her waist. "I know that feeling. I've known it for a very long time." "How long?" "Centuries." He said it simply, like a fact. "I've outlived everyone I have ever loved, friends, companions, those who swore loyalty and those who swore more. They all leave eventually. Death or choice, it does not matter. The result is the same." Gwendolyn looked up at him, this beautiful ancient creature who held her like she was the only warmth left in the world. "Then why did you come back here?" "Because I'm dying," Hadrian said, and the honesty in his voice made her stumble. He caught her easily, steadied her. "Not quickly, not dramatically, but there is a sickness that comes for immortals who live too long in grief. We fade, slowly, until one night we simply stop waking. That's why you look like this." She reached up without thinking, touched his face. His skin was cool and smooth, but she could see the shadows under his eyes, the faint hollowness in his cheeks. "You're disappearing." "Yes. Is there a cure?" Hadrian smiled, and it was the saddest thing she had ever seen. "There is, but I will not take it." "Why not?" "Because the cure is to form a true bond, to let someone in completely, to love again, deeply enough that it anchors me to the world." He looked away, out the windows at the lightening sky. "I swore I would never do that again. The last time nearly destroyed me when it ended. I would rather fade than survive another loss." Gwendolyn's heart twisted painfully. She understood the fear behind his words, the way grief could make you barricade yourself so tightly that nothing could touch you, not even joy. She had been doing the same thing for 2 years, working nights, avoiding friends, letting the world move on without her. "So you came here to die," she said. "I came here to hear the music one last time. And then, yes, let go." Hadrian looked back at her, and his expression was devastatingly gentle. "But then you were here and you played like you were pouring your soul into the keys, and I thought, perhaps I'd been wrong. Perhaps there was still something worth hearing." They were still swaying, barely moving now, just holding each other as the light outside grew stronger. Gwendolyn knew she should be afraid. She was dancing with a vampire king who had just admitted he was fading, a creature who could kill her without effort, whose world was so far from hers that they might as well be from different planets. But all she felt was a strange, fierce ache, a desire to reach into him and pull him back from the edge he was standing on. "What if you didn't have to let go?" she whispered. Hadrian closed his eyes. "Gwendolyn, what if there was something worth staying for? Do not." His voice was rough, almost pleading. "Do not offer me hope. I'm too old to carry it." "Then just stay tonight," she said. "Tomorrow I'll come back and tune another piano, and you can listen again, that's all, one day at a time." He opened his eyes, and the storm in them was wild and wounded. "Why would you do this?" "Because I know what it's like to want the night to last forever," Gwendolyn said, "and maybe we can both figure out how to want the morning again." Hadrian stared at her, and then he pulled her closer, rested his forehead against hers, and they stood like that as the sun began to rise outside, painting the ocean in shades of gold and pink. The light touched the edges of the conservatory, and Hadrian drew back, careful to stay in the shadows. "I have to go," he said. "The sun." "I know." "Will you come back?" "Yes." He lifted her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles with an old-world courtesy that made her heart skip. "Then I will listen." He was gone before she could respond, moving with that impossible speed, and Gwendolyn was left alone in the conservatory with the piano and the rising sun and the feeling that something irreversible had just begun. She came back the next night, and the night after that, and Hadrian was always waiting in the conservatory, standing in the shadows like a ghost made solid. She would play for hours, and he would listen, and afterward they would talk about music and memory and all the ways grief could reshape a person. He told her about his life before the fading, centuries of ruling a bloodline that stretched across Europe, of politics and power, and the endless, exhausting work of keeping his people safe. He told her about the woman he had loved 300 years ago, a human like Gwendolyn, who had chosen mortality over eternity with him because she could not bear the thought of watching everyone she loved die while she remained. "She was right," Hadrian said one night as they sat together on the bench, shoulders touching. "It is unbearable. I should not have asked her to stay." Gwendolyn looked at him, at the sharp lines of his profile, the way the candlelight caught in his silver hair. "Did you love her?" "With everything I had?" "Then it wasn't wrong to ask. Love is always a risk." "But you understand her choice," Hadrian said. "You would choose the same." Gwendolyn thought about it, about what it would mean to live forever, to watch the world change and the people in it fade like flowers. "I don't know. Maybe, but I think I'd regret not trying." Hadrian turned to her, his gray eyes searching. "You are dangerous, Gwendolyn Hart." "Why?" "Because you make me want to try again." Her breath caught. "Would that be so terrible?" "Yes," he said quietly, "because I will fall in love with you, and you will leave, and I will fade faster than I am now. I'm not leaving. Everyone leaves." "Not by choice," Gwendolyn said fiercely. "My sister didn't choose to go. Your love didn't want to leave. She just couldn't stay. That's different than abandoning someone." Hadrian looked away, jaw tight. "The result is still the same." "No, it's not." She reached out, took his hand. His fingers curled around hers immediately, like a reflex. "One is grief, the other is betrayal. Don't confuse them." He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "I fell in love with you the first night, when you offered to dance, when you looked at me like I was not something to fear, but someone who needed music as much as you did. I have been in love with you for weeks, and it terrifies me." Gwendolyn's heart thundered in her chest. "Hadrian." "I know." He brought her hand to his chest, pressed it there. She could not feel a heartbeat, but she could feel something, a hum of ancient power, a warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. "I know it is too soon. I know I am being foolish, but I will not lie to you. You deserve to know what you have done to me." She turned on the bench, faced him fully. "Then you should know that I'm falling too. I come here every night not because I need the work, but because I need you. Because you're the first person since my sister died who makes me feel like maybe I'm allowed to be happy again." Gwendolyn. Her name on his lips was a prayer. "I want to try," she said. "I want to risk it. Both of us. Together." Hadrian cupped her face with both hands, his touch unbearably tender. "If I bond with you, if I let myself love you completely, I will never let you go. I will be possessive and protective and utterly insufferable. I will want to keep you safe from everything, including time itself. That is what I am. I know. And if something happens to you, if I lose you, I will not survive it. The fading will take me within days. Then we'll make sure nothing happens to me," Gwendolyn said, "and you'll teach me how to navigate your world, and I'll teach you how to live in the daylight again, even if it's just in memory." He leaned forward, rested his forehead against hers. "You're asking me to be brave." "I'm asking us both to be brave." Hadrian kissed her then, soft and careful, like he was afraid she might break. His lips were cool and gentle, and Gwendolyn leaned into him, wrapped her arms around his neck, and kissed him back with all the feeling she'd been holding inside for weeks. He made a sound low in his throat, pulled her closer, and the kiss deepened, became something desperate and hungry and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both of them were shaking. "I will try," Hadrian said, his voice rough. "For you, I will try." The weeks that followed were the happiest Gwendolyn had known in years. Hadrian began to show her his world, the parts of it that existed in shadow and secret. He took her to a gathering of his court, immortals who lived in a network of tunnels beneath the city, a place of marble halls and ancient tapestries and candlelight that never wavered. They looked at her with curiosity and caution, this human who had captured their king's attention, but Hadrian kept her close, his hand at her waist, his presence a shield against any challenge. "They will accept you," he said as they walked through the halls afterward. "They can see that I am stronger already, that the fading has slowed." Gwendolyn looked up at him, and it was true. The shadows under his eyes had lightened, and his skin did not look quite so pale, quite so translucent. "Because of me? Because of us?" He stopped, turned to face her. "The bond is forming. I can feel it. You are becoming part of me, written into my blood and bones. It is terrifying and wonderful, and I do not want it to stop." She kissed him there in the hallway, in full view of anyone who might pass, and he lifted her off her feet, held her against him like she weighed nothing, like she was precious beyond measure. But as the bond grew stronger, so did the danger. One night, as Gwendolyn was finishing her work in the conservatory, Hadrian appeared in the doorway, looking more serious than she had ever seen him. "We need to talk," he said. Gwendolyn set down her tuning wrench. "What's wrong?" He crossed the room, took her hands. "The bond is nearly complete. I can feel it settling into place, but there's something I have not told you, something I should have explained weeks ago." Her stomach tightened with worry. "Tell me." "The fading is not just a sickness, it is a test of sorts, a mechanism built into our blood by the first of our kind." Hadrian's grip tightened on her hands. "It is meant to ensure that immortals do not become callous, do not forget what it is to feel. When we outlive everyone we love, when we close ourselves off from connection, the fading begins. It can only be cured by forming a true bond, by opening ourselves to love again. You told me that already. But I did not tell you what happens if the bond is rejected," Hadrian said, his voice strained. "If I form the bond and then choose to sever it, if I decide the risk is too great and pull away, the fading will accelerate. I will die within days." Gwendolyn felt cold. "Why would you reject it?" "Because I am afraid," he said simply. "Because every day I love you more, and every day the thought of losing you becomes more unbearable. And I'm beginning to wonder if I am strong enough to live with that fear, or if I will break and pull away to save myself the pain." She stared at him, heart pounding. "Hadrian, you can't." "I know." He pulled her close, wrapped his arms around her. "But you need to understand what you are risking. If I fail you, if I am too weak to hold on, I will die. And it will be my choice, my cowardice, not fate." Gwendolyn held him tightly, her face pressed against his chest. "Then don't fail me. Don't pull away. I'm right here and I'm not going anywhere." "What if something happens to you?" "Then we'll deal with it together." She pulled back, looked up at him. "But you can't spend our whole lives waiting for disaster. That's not living. That's just a slower kind of fading." Hadrian closed his eyes, his jaw working. "I do not know how to do this, how to be vulnerable without being terrified." "Neither do I," Gwendolyn said, "but we're doing it anyway." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips, and she felt the desperation in it, the way he was clinging to her like an anchor. "I will not let you go," he said against her mouth. "I swear it. I will be brave enough for this." 2 weeks later, Hadrian told her the bond was complete. They were in the conservatory again, just before dawn, and he had been holding her hand for the better part of an hour, his thumb tracing circles on her palm, his expression distant. "I can feel your heartbeat," he said quietly. "Even when I am rooms away, I can sense your emotions like shadows at the edge of my mind. When you are happy, I feel lighter. When you are sad, it aches. Gwendolyn laced her fingers through his. Is that frightening? Yes. He looked at her, and his eyes were storm wild. And it is the most alive I have felt in 300 years. So the fading is gone? Almost. Hadrian hesitated, and something in his expression made her uneasy. There is one final step, a choice I have to make. What choice? He stood, paced to the windows, his shoulders tense. To fully cure the fading, I have to acknowledge the bond out loud. In front of witnesses, I have to claim you publicly, tell my court that you are mine and I am yours, that I choose this even knowing the risks. Gwendolyn joined him at the window. That doesn't sound so hard. It is. His voice was raw. Because once I do, there's no going back. The bond will be permanent, unbreakable. And if I lose you, I will not survive it. Not days, hours perhaps. The pain would be too great. Hadrian. She touched his arm, felt the tension in his muscles. Why are you hesitating? He turned to her, and the anguish in his face made her heart clench. Because I am a coward, because I would rather fade slowly, with you beside me, but the bond incomplete, than risk the agony of claiming you fully and then losing you. Gwendolyn felt something crack inside her. You'd rather die slowly than love me completely. I do love you completely, he said desperately. That is the problem. I love you so much it terrifies me. Then trust me, she said, her voice shaking. Trust that we'll figure it out, that we'll have time, that love is worth the risk. Hadrian closed his eyes. I want to, but I have lived so long, seen so much loss. I do not know if I am capable of that kind of faith anymore. Gwendolyn felt tears sting her eyes. She understood his fear, she did. But it also felt like a rejection, like he was choosing death over a life with her, because he could not bear the possibility of pain. Then I guess you have to decide, she said quietly. What you're more afraid of, losing me, or never really having me at all. She left the conservatory then, walked out into the pre-dawn light, and cried in her car until the sun came up. For 3 nights she did not return to the estate. She threw herself into other work, tuned pianos in concert halls and private homes, tried to pretend that her heart was not breaking. But every moment felt hollow, and she dreamed of Hadrian every time she closed her eyes, his face haunted and desperate, his hands reaching for her. On the 4th night, she gave in and drove back to the cliffside estate. The conservatory was dark when she arrived, and for a moment she thought he was not there. But then she saw him, standing at the windows, staring out at the ocean. He looked thinner, paler, the shadows back under his eyes. You're fading again, she said, her voice echoing in the empty room. Hadrian turned, and the relief on his face when he saw her was overwhelming. Gwendolyn, you're choosing to die rather than claim me. It was not a question. I am trying to protect you, he said, his voice hoarse. If I claim you and something happens, you will feel my death through the bond. It will hurt you. And you think this doesn't hurt? She crossed the room, anger and grief warring in her chest. You think watching you fade because you're too afraid to love me isn't agony? I do love you. Not enough to fight for us. The words came out sharp, bitter. Not enough to believe we can survive. Hadrian flinched like she had struck him. That's not fair. None of this is fair, Gwendolyn said, but I'm here. I came back. I'm choosing you even knowing the risks, and you won't do the same for me. He stared at her, his expression cracking, and then he crossed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms, held her so tightly she could barely breathe. I am sorry, he said into her hair. I am so sorry. You are right. You are braver than I am, and you deserve better. Gwendolyn clutched at his shirt, tears streaming down her face. I don't want better. I want you. But I need all of you, not half measures and fear. Hadrian pulled back just enough to cup her face, his touch trembling. If I do this, if I claim you, I will never let you go. I will be impossible and overbearing, and I will spend every day trying to keep you safe. Good, she said fiercely. I'll do the same for you. He kissed her then, deep and desperate, and she tasted salt on his lips, realized he was crying. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers, his breathing ragged. I'm terrified, he said. Me too. But I want to try. I want mornings with you, not just endless nights waiting for the end. Then try, Gwendolyn said. Let's both try. Hadrian held her for a long time, the two of them swaying together in the darkness, and outside, the ocean roared and the wind sang and the sky began to lighten toward dawn. I will call my court, he said finally. Tomorrow night, I will claim you in front of them, make the bond permanent. Gwendolyn felt hope flare in her chest, bright and fierce. You're sure? No. He smiled, and it was fragile, but real. But I'm choosing you anyway. The next night, Gwendolyn returned to the estate dressed in a simple black dress that Hadrian had sent for her, sleek and elegant and entirely appropriate for a vampire court. She was nervous, her hands shaking as she walked through the marble halls toward the great chamber where the court had gathered. Hadrian met her at the entrance, resplendent in dark formal clothing, his silver hair pulled back, his eyes bright with something that looked like determination and terror in equal measure. "Are you ready?" he asked. "Are you?" He took her hand, kissed her knuckles. "I will be, as long as you are beside me." They entered the chamber together, and Gwendolyn's breath caught at the sight. Dozens of vampires stood in a semicircle around a raised dais, all of them pale and beautiful and ancient, their eyes fixed on Hadrian and her with varying degrees of curiosity and judgment. The room was lit by hundreds of candles, and the air smelled like incense and old stone. Hadrian led her to the center of the dais, and the room fell utterly silent. "I have called you here tonight to bear witness," Hadrian said, his voice carrying through the chamber with the authority of centuries. "For months I have been fading, lost to grief and time. You have watched me withdraw, seen the sickness take hold. Some of you have made peace with my end, but I have not." He turned to Gwendolyn, and his expression was open, vulnerable. "This is Gwendolyn Hart. She is human, mortal, and I love her with everything I am. She brought music back into my life when I thought I would never hear it again. She reminded me what it is to hope, to want the morning instead of dread it." Gwendolyn's eyes stung with tears, but she smiled at him, squeezed his hand. "I am here tonight to claim her," Hadrian continued, looking back at the court, "to form a permanent bond, to tie my life to hers and accept all the risks that come with it. I know this is dangerous. I know that if I lose her, I will not survive. But I would rather have a lifetime of loving her and risk the pain than fade alone because I was too afraid to reach for joy." The room was silent, and then one of the vampires, a woman with white blonde hair and sharp features, stepped forward. "And what of her?" the woman asked. "Does she understand what she's accepting? The weight of being bonded to a king?" Hadrian looked at Gwendolyn, a question in his eyes. She stepped forward, her voice steady. "I understand. I know the risks, and I know what it means to tie my life to his, but I also know what it's like to live half a life, stuck in grief and fear. Hadrian makes me want to be brave again. He makes me want mornings and music and a future I can look forward to. So yes, I accept. I choose him, and I choose this bond." The woman studied her for a long moment, and then she nodded. "Then let it be done." Hadrian turned to Gwendolyn, took both her hands. "I claim you, Gwendolyn Hart, as mine. My heart, my anchor, my reason to remain in this world. I will protect you, cherish you, and love you for as long as we both draw breath." Gwendolyn felt something shift in the air, a warmth that spread through her chest like sunlight. "I claim you, Hadrian Valtoris, as mine. My love, my partner, my choice. I will stand beside you, in your world and mine, for as long as we have." The bond snapped into place, a connection that blazed between them, bright and unbreakable. Gwendolyn gasped at the intensity of it, felt Hadrian's emotions flood through her love and relief and fierce, overwhelming joy. She could feel his heartbeat, or whatever passed for it in his immortal body, steady and strong. Hadrian pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and the court erupted in murmurs, some approving, some skeptical. But none of it mattered because he was holding her like she was his entire world, and she could feel through the bond that it was true. When they finally broke apart, Hadrian was smiling, really smiling, and the shadows under his eyes were gone, his skin glowing with renewed vitality. "You saved me," he said, quiet enough that only she could hear. We saved each other, Gwendolyn corrected. The court began to disperse, satisfied that their king had survived his fading, and Hadrian led Gwendolyn out of the chamber and back toward the conservatory. They walked in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, and when they reached the room with the grand piano, he pulled her close. "Dance with me," he said. "We don't have music. We do not need it." He took her hand, settled his other at her waist, and they began to move together, swaying in the candlelight, the ocean roaring outside the windows. But there was music, faintly, drifting from somewhere deeper in the estate. Hadrian had arranged for musicians from his court to play, a string quartet that filled the halls with something soft and timeless. They danced for hours, the two of them lost in each other, and the music played on and on, the musicians bound by some old tradition to continue until the king released them. But Hadrian did not release them. He held Gwendolyn through the night, through the slow shift of hours, and the musicians played until exhaustion began to take them, their notes wavering. Still, Hadrian danced, his arms around Gwendolyn, his face buried in her hair, and she understood that this was his way of claiming time, of making the night last as long as he could, because it was the first one he had spent in centuries without fear. Finally, as the sky outside began to lighten, as dawn crept over the ocean in shades of gold and rose, the musicians could play no longer. One by one they slumped over their instruments, asleep from exhaustion, and the music faded into silence. Hadrian stopped moving, but did not let go of Gwendolyn. He looked down at her, his expression soft and wondering. "The musicians fell asleep," he said quietly. "I noticed, and I'm still here, still awake, still wanting to see what comes next." Gwendolyn reached up, touched his face. "What has come next?" Hadrian smiled, and it was full of hope, of possibility. "Mornings, music, a life with you." 6 months later, they stood together in the grand hall of the estate, now restored and transformed into a music hall open to the public. Mortals and immortals alike filled the seats, drawn by rumors of the acoustics, of the mysterious silver-haired owner and his human partner who had brought life back to the cliffside mansion. Gwendolyn tuned the pianos and oversaw the musicians, and Hadrian managed the logistics, his court helping from the shadows. It was a strange partnership, two worlds blending in a way that should not have worked but somehow did. On opening night, Gwendolyn played the Venetian piano herself, the same instrument that had started everything, and the audience listened in rapt silence. Hadrian stood at the edge of the room, watching her with an expression of such love and pride that it made her heart ache. When she finished, the applause was thunderous, and she stood and took a bow. Hadrian crossed the room, took her hand, and kissed her in front of everyone, and the crowd erupted again, charmed by the romance of it. Later, when the hall had emptied and they were alone in the conservatory, Hadrian pulled her into his lap on the piano bench and held her close. "I have been thinking," he said. "About what?" "About the future, about what it looks like for us." He hesitated, and she could feel his nervousness through the bond. "You are mortal, and I am not. Eventually, we will have to decide how to navigate that." Gwendolyn had been thinking about it too, the question of time and eternity. "And what do you want?" "I want whatever you want," Hadrian said. "If you wish to remain mortal, to live a human lifespan, I will treasure every moment we have and find a way to survive the grief when you are gone. If you wish to become immortal, to join me in the endless years, I will help you make that choice, but it has to be your decision." Gwendolyn turned in his arms, faced him fully. "What would you choose, if it were up to you?" "Selfishly, I would choose to keep you forever," he admitted, "but I will not pressure you. This has to be something you want." She thought about it, about what it would mean to live forever, to watch the world change and her family age and die. It was a heavy choice, one she could not make lightly. But when she looked at Hadrian, at the way he watched her like she was his entire universe, she thought maybe it was worth it. "I need time to decide," she said, "but I'm not leaving you. Whether I'm mortal or immortal, I'm staying." Hadrian kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "Then that is enough. We will figure the rest out together." They sat together in the conservatory as the sun rose outside, painting the room in gold. And for the first time in centuries, Hadrian did not fear the dawn. Instead, he held Gwendolyn close, listened to the sound of her heartbeat through the bond, and felt grateful for mornings, for music, for the woman who had taught him that love was worth the risk of loss. The piano sat silent beside them, but they did not need it. They had each other, and they had time, however much or little it turned out to be, and that was more than either of them had ever dared to hope for. Outside, the ocean roared, the wind sang, and the world continued to turn. Inside, two people who had been drowning in grief found each other and chose to swim toward the light together, toward mornings and music, and a future built on trust and love, and the courage to reach for joy even when the risk was unbearable. And in the end, that courage was enough. It had to be, because they had each other, and the musicians had fallen asleep at dawn, and Hadrian Valtoris, king of an ancient bloodline, had held Gwendolyn Hart through the night and chosen to greet the morning beside her. They were together, and they were whole, and the music would never be silent again.